Well, hello and welcome to our midweek message for this, the first week in the season of Easter. And I'm Chris, and I'm the team rector here in the Golden Cap benefice. I hope you had an enjoyable Easter weekend. I know that many of you made it to one of the services that we had in the churches across the Golden Cap benefice. And I also know that for some of you it was just too soon to feel ready to come back to church just yet. And I just want you to know that that's perfectly understandable too in the circumstances. But one of the things that I noticed over the weekend at the church services that I was involved in was the way that people were greeting each other in a socially distanced way, of course. But having not seen one another for quite some time, there were comments like, "Is it really you?" Or, "You're much taller than I remember." Someone pointed out to me that they thought that my beard was much greyer than when they had last seen me at Christmas time. So there was some familiarity, but also a recognition that things were also different and new, that things had changed a little. And familiar yet different and new is the story of the Easter season that we now find ourselves in. We see it everywhere in the resurrection encounters that those first disciples have with Jesus. For example, after his resurrection, Jesus still has flesh and bones, and he can still eat and talk and cook bread and fish as he did for those first disciples who'd gone fishing. And he can still be felt and touched, as Thomas found out when he accepted Jesus' invitation to put his hands into Jesus' wounds. This is the familiar stuff of life, and it's all still there for the risen Jesus. And yet, Jesus is no longer constrained by the physical and natural. He can appear in one place at one moment and somewhere else the next. He can walk through locked doors and vanish as quickly as he appeared. So things are familiar, but they're also different and new. This new resurrection life brings together the physical and the spiritual, the natural and the supernatural, humanity and divinity, earth and heaven. Things are familiar, but they're also different and new. And we see this too in the way that the disciples don't always see or recognize Jesus. He gets mistaken for the gardener, or a pilgrim traveller on the road to Emmaus, or a ghost in the upper room, or a stranger on the shoreline. Only when he does something familiar does he become recognizable, like the way he calls Mary by her name and she recognizes his voice, or like the way that he breaks bread at the home of the disciples in Emmaus, and they recognize that gesture and they recognize Jesus as he makes it. Or like the way that Jesus calls to the disciples from the shoreline, "Throw your net onto the right side of the boat and you'll find some fish." And in that moment, some of those fishermen disciples remember the moment when they were first called by Jesus, when he orchestrated another large catch of fish. And then they're able to say, "It is the Lord." So Jesus is recognizable, but it's not always obvious. Minds have to open for him to be discovered and recognized. Things are familiar, but they're different and new. And maybe this is how it will be for us as we emerge from lockdown. I hope that there will be things that are familiar, voices, gestures, or words that remind us of our place in the world and our place in God's purposes. But I also hope that things will be new and different, that we will learn to recognize the presence of the risen Lord in new ways and in new places and in new people, like in gardeners and in pilgrims and in those who walk the shorelines. So in this Easter season, may we learn to recognize Christ in both the familiar and in the new and different. And may we learn to embrace him in both. So may God bless you today, and may you know the joy and peace of this resurrection life in this season of Easter. I think she was right about that beard. God bless you.